Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen Odegaard, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. Welcome back to the Stop Overthinking podcast. Today, we are talking about love versus people pleasing. And I want to talk about this topic because I talked about unconditional love last week. And in the past, you've heard me talk about generous assumptions, assuming that people are doing the best they can. And people understand parts of this message. Part of that is because our brain just really wants to hear what it's always heard. And so it's just keeps interpreting it a certain way. And I want to be really clear. So one of the things that I've noticed is just the terminology and saying the words unconditional love can be misinterpreted. So the way that I teach about unconditional love is that it's something that we do for ourselves. It's a beautiful choice, and we can make it towards someone regardless of what they're doing. And that means that people don't have to change in order for us to love them. People don't have to behave a certain way for us to love them. They don't even have to behave properly or respectfully for us to love them. We can love them no matter what. When we have those thoughts, we feel this experience of love in our bodies. And then it's really one of the ways that we take care of ourselves, right? Because we're feeling it, is that we love people at our own expense. And that is actually the opposite of what I'm talking about. So a client might say to me, I'm going to continue to invite them over and spend time with them because that's what it means to love them unconditionally. And that's not true, because we can love people unconditionally and still have boundaries and limits, because again, this is about us. So those thoughts about loving a person unconditionally and letting them do whatever they want, maybe that's staying in a relationship or a marriage or continuing a friendship or even a relationship with family members, please hear me. There's a really clear distinction between why you continue that relationship long enough to own your own happiness and what unconditional love really means. And it does not mean doing things at your own expense. When you say or think about unconditional love in a way that costs you the love for yourself, you're doing it wrong. Unconditional love starts with you, and unconditionally loving other people is also about you. And you will know the difference because of how you feel. What that tingly feeling is going on in your body, or the calmness that you feel in your body. Love is going to feel different for different people, but you really want to love them unconditionally. Maybe this is a family member. And ask yourself this question. Do I believe that loving this person unconditionally requires me to lie? Spoiler alert, the answer is no. If you are in a relationship with a person, again, whether that's personal or an intimate relationship, people pleasing really is lying. If you are hiding your thoughts and feelings, saying things that aren't quite true, it's a lie. It can even be manipulative if you aren't honest about what you want and need in order to get the other person to like or love or respect you. It's not unconditional love for yourself. In fact, it's the opposite, because you're lying about who you are. You're not loving yourself and allowing what you actually feel. Now, that doesn't mean you're not kind. It just means that you are honest with yourself. Unconditional love for yourself and for others includes truth and loving them no matter how they respond to the truth. So here's another example. I often coach people in their adult relationships with their parents. So for example, if we're talking about someone's mother and wanting to unconditionally love their mother, and that is being interpreted as spending every holiday with her and letting her come over whenever she wants, and listening to her whenever she calls and whatever she has to say. Even when she's coming over when I don't want her to come over, or she's giving me advice that I didn't ask for or want. I do this because this is unconditional love. And I would tell this person, okay, that is not unconditional love. That is people pleasing. And how do you know? Because it doesn't feel like love in you. It feels like resentment. It feels like obligation. Unconditional love is telling your mother the truth. And you say, I'm not going to come over on this holiday. We made other plans. Or that I can't allow you to come over unannounced. This doesn't work for me. Again, how you say that, you can choose to be kind. But if you are continuing to go through these steps because you're so afraid of hurting their feelings and you're repressing your own feelings, that isn't love for you or for the other person. It's a giant mess, is really what it is. It's people pleasing. So when we have unconditional love, it's about truth, because unconditional love and people pleasing do not go together. It's one or the other. People pleasing is lying and manipulating, and it might be lying by omission, by just not really saying what you really mean. And it's always at your own expense. People pleasing is at your own expense. Unconditional love is about truth and love for yourself and extending it to the other person. So the challenge, again, with unconditional love is starting with yourself. Do you love yourself enough to tell the truth to yourself and to the other people? Will you love yourself even after you say these things out loud and deal with the consequences that come with that? Will you love that person no matter how they respond to the whatever it is that you do or say? And so that's the first step, is working through that and being clear with yourself before you can extend that on to other people. The work is worth it for you in the long term. The problem is that people pleasing feels good in the moment because you tell people what they want to hear. You get a response that you want. It's a little hit of adrenaline or dopamine. And so we think that we keep doing that. And if we don't get that, then it means something about you and we misconstrue this whole thing. But love is what feels good for the long term. It's telling the truth and saying, this is what I know about me. This is what I believe about me. This is what I want. And this is what's true. And letting the other person be who they are with you in your authentic self and continuing to choose to love them anyway. And that might even mean like, I can't be friends with you anymore, or I can't hang out with you anymore. Doesn't mean that you can't feel love towards them. This is knowing yourself really well and then also setting limits about what you want and need. You can love a person from afar. You can love a person who doesn't love you back. So it can sound like, I don't want to spend the holidays with you, or please don't come over to my house unless I invite you. Or I can't do this thing that you're asking me to do with the charity or group. I want to talk a little bit about marriage, because this is also a question that I get a lot. And if you are in a marriage and you're committed to loving your spouse unconditionally, it is really hard to do if you don't love yourself unconditionally and tell yourself the truth first. Knowing yourself, loving yourself first, and that includes all of your opinions and all your thoughts and the parts that feel true. So again, knowing yourself, owning your own thoughts and feelings is really where you need to start. And so if you're in this relationship, and let's say that you have a partner that's doing something that is, I'm doing air quotes, driving you crazy. We know it's really what your thoughts are that are making you feel crazy. Okay, but that's the term that people use. So loving them doesn't require them to stop doing that thing. Maybe it's hanging out with a certain group of people and you don't like it because they're drinking, they're obnoxious, they go places you don't want to go, whatever. It doesn't require your spouse to stop being with those people. They can keep doing what they're doing, and you are choosing to love them anyway. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily go with them. It doesn't mean that you even stay with your partner if this is a really big contention and it's behavior that you decide you can't live with. Remember, this is about how you feel, and you're being able to tell the truth that I don't want to go. I don't want to participate in that. I don't like it when you do that. I would like for you to stop and that we could do something else. Those might all be part of your truth, and you can love your partner anyway, even when you don't agree. What that means for the relationship long term is a different conversation, but love is always a choice, right? We talked about that last week. It's always a choice that you can choose because it's about you and how you want to show up in the world. So if you love yourself and your own opinion, you want to honor that for yourself. That's going to require you to tell yourself the truth about what this person is doing and whether you want to participate or be around it or not. That unconditional love is fierce for yourself. It's honoring what you want and then telling yourself the truth and allowing that truth to live out in the world with the other people. When we don't do that, when it's people pleasing, when we push things down, we're really feeling resentment and we're calling it love, or people pleasing and we're calling it love. But again, if you check in with what love feels like and what you're labeling as love, you will notice that is not the same. So, knowing what you're really feeling and not attributing it to something that it's not. When we call people pleasing loving unconditionally, it feels like obligation, and we're completely missing the point. We drain ourselves of our own self-respect and our own truth. We don't know how to hear our own truth. We don't even know what's true because we get so good at people pleasing and we call it love, and then we completely lose ourselves. And this is really easy to confuse that love and people pleasing, likely because that was encouraged while you were growing up, and that's how it was labeled. It might have been labeled love or respect. And that can make, especially parental relationships as an adult, even more complex now. Like, it might look like love on the outside, but if it feels crappy to you on the inside, that's not love. Again, a lot of clients, we talk about their relationship like with their mom as an adult. And people may see on the outside, and what's portrayed on the outside is it looks like a great relationship. But my client is telling me it doesn't feel good. And it's because you're not telling yourself the truth. It looked like love, but it really wasn't. And so you need to, again, be honest with yourself. And you can still be kind, but that doesn't mean people pleasing, because you're lying to yourself, you're lying to her, and then we're labeling that as love. And it doesn't feel good. Take some time to think and reflect about what is actually going on. The other part of this that I want to say is really important comes from Byron Katie. I've mentioned her before. She's an author and a speaker. And she uses the phrase, I love you and no. I love you and no. And so that helps you recognize the truth in yourself. And that can be, I still love you and no, I'm not going to do this. I love you and I'm not going to go there. I love you and that doesn't work for me. And allowing the other person to have their own response. So, as you're reflecting, when you take a look at your life as a whole and you need to take an inventory, where am I still people pleasing? Where am I lying? What isn't true for me anymore? And what is true? And you can go through your relationships. And if there is a relationship that you're really struggling with, don't start with that one. Pick another family member or some other things, maybe a coworker, or because it's going to be harder for you to separate that out if you're already really in kind of a emotional upheaval with a certain person. And what comes up for you? What does that look like? Do you feel like you're loving yourself unconditionally for what's true for you? Are you good with those reasons? And make sure you like your reasons. You want to make sure that you understand, I don't want to be friends with this person anymore. I don't want to hang out with this group anymore. And if you're good with your reasons and that feels true to you, that's also telling the person instead of making up lies and excuses about why you're not hanging out anymore or just ignoring them. So I'm not saying that it's not uncomfortable at some time, but the long-term piece of knowing yourself, knowing your truth, feeling that love that you can put out there, that you're creating, that's what feels good overall and long term. Know that that just doesn't work. If it's something at your own expense, that's denial of the truth and something isn't in alignment. That doesn't mean that you don't make sacrifices in your own life for someone else. But when you do it from love, it doesn't feel icky. It feels right. It feels good. And you know that that's the loving thing that you can do for that person. And here's the deciding factor. Am I also being true when I'm responding and thinking about this? Okay. In the past, I might have been willing to lie and say, oh, I'd really love to do that. And I might go through and do it, but inside I'm resentful. I don't want to. I'm irritated. And that truly isn't doing it from love. It's not something that feels good. So for my kids, and my daughter is notorious for coming up with plans with her friends, and none of them can drive and none of them have any money because they're 13 years old. And so then they come to me and are like, hey, we want to go do this thing and you need to pick up these 3 people and then take us there and then pick us back up and then drop off all these other people. And most of the time, that's not something that I want to do, especially if it hasn't been planned. I want things to be planned and that I can do that, especially not sprung on me. And so I say that to my daughter. Like, I don't always love being the chauffeur, but I know that this is important to you and I'm going to do it anyway. Or it might go back to the I love you and know that I do love you and no, I'm not going to rearrange my entire evening for this right now. Doesn't mean I love her any less, but I'm also not lying about it. I'm not making up an excuse. And if I want to be honest and say, hey, I have time on, say, Thursday, and if you can work that out for your group, then let's make it happen then. And I'm coming at it from a place of my choice. I'm being true to myself, and it's not a point where I get resentful. There are times that we really don't want to do something. The difference is, you can still be kind, but being honest, like, oh, that's going to be a lot for me to do, and I will try and work it in and mean it. Or to say no. So part of unconditional love, part of these generous assumptions for other people is also having very firm limits and knowing yourself and knowing your limits. Where does it stop, end? And being able to express that, right? That's all about those boundaries. So go through and ask yourself, where are you not in alignment? Where might you be lying to yourself? Where are you telling yourself that things are okay when they're really not? Where are you telling yourself that you're loving someone and it's being mislabeled? Know that when I ask this question to clients, sometimes they're afraid to tell me the truth because they don't like it and they feel like they should be thinking about it differently, or that I'm going to want them to change the way they think about it. And that's not the case, right? This is about knowing yourself. And I will tell them, listen, you get to think whatever you want. My only suggestion is that you tell yourself the truth about it. You can't know what is genuine for yourself if you don't have integrity for yourself. So if you tell yourself you want to do something, but unconsciously or subconsciously you really don't, you're just lying to yourself. You miss out on you miss out on what's true for you miss out on your guidance and the wisdom and the way you want to show up in the world. So people can tell me, I don't like being around my husband and his friends when they're drinking. And I'm going to say, okay, and be honest. It doesn't mean that you have to stop being around him. It means, how are you going to own that? And it might mean that you stop being around them, but you have to be able to own that for yourself. When people are asking you to do things, especially when it's your family members and it's things that you don't want to do, you can choose to do them out of love, and that choice feels good. If it doesn't feel good, don't label it as love. At least in your own body and mind, label it for what it is. Maybe it's obligation. Maybe it's resentment. But decide that for yourself. People pleasing feels easier in the moment. It's an easier way to have more relationships, at least on the surface. But it can be really gut-wrenching long term. It's easier to show up socially and just tell people what they want to hear, but it feels icky inside. You lose yourself. You don't get to experience what unconditional love is for yourself or someone else, because that love for someone else is telling them the truth. They may not like it. They may choose to end the relationship, and you can love them anyway. That's what love is. Owning your own emotions, being responsible for it, and letting other people also have their own. Love is telling someone the truth, loving them no matter how they respond, loving yourself no matter how you respond. Lying to yourself, lying to other people, that is people pleasing, and it's not love. And you know it because it feels terrible. It can even feel toxic in the long run. So, where are you lying to yourself? Where are you not willing to tell yourself the truth? Where are you lying to other people and not being willing to tell them? You can continue on that path if you want. Of course you can. But I highly recommend that you at least stop lying to yourself. Tell yourself when you're lying. Acknowledge that. Acknowledge when you're people pleasing, and do not label it as love. And definitely don't label it as unconditional love. So start with telling yourself the truth about what you really want. Notice and be true if you don't have boundaries. That's step one. You don't even have to change anything right away. Just acknowledge it. Pay attention. And if it's something at your own expense, it's not love. And the longer that you're able to tell yourself the truth about it, you will not feel okay with the lying. You start telling other people the truth, and you love them because you want to. Unconditional love is never at your own expense. People pleasing is at your own expense. Love includes the truth and loving yourself and loving other people no matter how they respond. So I hope this clarification was helpful. As always, I love your comments and questions. You can contact me on social media. Please like and share this episode. And if you love this podcast, Thank you for listening to the Stop Overthinking podcast with Kristen Odegaard. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who would benefit from the message. To learn more about working with me and links to social media and free resources, head over to my website, coachwithkristen.com. That's Kristen spelled Kristen. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Have a great week.